Hey there, I'm Sandy. Brace yourselves because, at the ripe age of 28, I'm officially divorced from my ex-wife, Jane. Yeah, you heard it right. Just a few months ago, can you believe it? I met Jane back in college, sharing classes and all that. But hold on, it gets wild. We started chatting innocently. Next thing you know, we're head over heels for each other, cruising through what seemed like the perfect relationship. And then boom, the whole marriage thing kaput. Shocking, huh? There was one problem, and that was Jane's mother, Linda. For some reason, she hated me and constantly tried to break Jane and me up. I would talk to Jane about the discomfort she made me feel, but Jane would never really do anything about it. Jane hated having to go against her mother, especially because she had only her growing up. I finally reached a breaking point and decided to brush off Linda's toxic antics. She had this annoying habit of nitpicking every little thing I did, and believe it or not, she'd even criticize aspects of me that she had zero clue about. I suspected Jane was spilling the beans to her, which just fueled my frustration. Our arguments escalated, but after a heated showdown, Jane caved in and finally put a lid on sharing my personal details with her. We dated for about 3 years before getting married. Linda realized that her words were no longer affecting me, so she began trying to influence Jane to divorce me. That never worked, and we went in low contact with her for a little while. During that time, both of us got promotions at work. However, I was earning a little more than Jane, so we split our expenses 60-40, with me paying the highest portion. We were happy as a couple, but as an individual, I began to feel like I wasn't doing enough. I needed to pick up a hobby. I had always been rather good with design, be it interior or otherwise, but if I needed to do something on the side, I figured I needed it to be something I could work on from the comfort of my home. I had this light bulb moment, and guess what popped into my head? Graphic design. Without a second thought, I dived into it, and lo and behold, turns out I've got some serious skills. Quietly, I enrolled in a couple of courses and snagged some top-notch equipment on the down low, all while keeping it hush-hush from Jane. I'm all about keeping my projects under wraps because, truth be told, I'm a bit of a project junkie, and not all of them pan out. The only person I told about my new venture in graphic design was my best friend Mike, so I've taken up an interest in something new. Oh, is this another one of your many hobbies that you'll lose interest in pretty fast? Mike asked. Hopefully not. I hope to get paid really well through it. You're going to get paid through it? Finally, don't hold back, spill. Well, you know how I have an eye for design and art. Don't tell me you're planning on painting. No, that's way too tiring. But I've begun graphic designing. That's a wonderful idea. That's actually a very profitable field. Yeah, I took a couple of courses, and I want to start working. You know what? I might be able to start a business. Whoa, I don't know about starting it by myself. I was thinking more of working with a firm. No, that's boring and not very different from what you're doing. You lose interest pretty fast, but I have a couple of friends who are also starting businesses of their own. I could introduce you to them, and you could help them design their logos and websites. That would be amazing. The people that Mike introduced me to happened to be these rich folks who had no problem throwing away money on a risk. As in, I had no other qualifications, and I was very much a beginner. But they liked my work a lot and introduced me to many other businesses and individuals. Slowly but surely, I began to earn a good amount of money through my side gig. It was a great relief because now Jane and I could live a lot easier. I began saving up little by little so I could buy Jane something nice. I hadn't told her, and whenever I wanted to, it felt like she never wanted to talk. I quickly realized something was up with her, but she never seemed to want to talk about it. The first month I noticed something was off was when Jane told me she had spent all of her money on some investments a week after she got paid. We did get into a little bit of an argument, but we got through that month. I pulled in a couple of extra hours at work, and everything was all right. The next month, Jane said the same thing again, and I was beyond upset. I was baffled. How could she blow through that much money in the blink of an eye? Frustration got the best of me, and I let loose a barrage of not-so-nice words. Sure, I regretted it afterward, but I thought maybe a dose of tough love would knock some responsibility into her. Yet, shockingly, the very next month, she pulled the same stunt. I was fed up by then. I had mastered the art of caution, so I just put in extra hours to make up for it. Anyway, aside from my actual job, My graphic designing side gig was also going great, and in fact, that was what was paying the bills more than anything. But when Jane didn't have money again for the first month, I was done with her. How could you let this happen again? Do you literally learn nothing? I asked. Look, I'm just trying to get as much return as I can, and I'm messing up a little, she replied. It's not a little when you're investing and losing your entire pay. You have your money, right? We'll just do what we've been doing for so long. No, I'm tired of this. I will not support you this month. You figure out your own expenses. What? You can't do that. Well, you can't gamble away all your pay either, but here we are. So what? I'm just supposed to starve and take public transport. There will be food at home because I'll ensure that all our shared expenses are covered. You have to take public transport because you can't pay for your own gas. So you want me to actually look poor? Taking public transport is in no way a reflection of your status. Stop being entitled. If you wanted to drive your own car, you should have thought twice about gambling away all your money. You're a selfish and ruthless person. How could you do this to your spouse? What about what you're doing to me? I've been working extra hours just to cover up your losses. Can't you at least try to see my perspective? Nah, you've got zero understanding of where I'm coming from. I'm out of here. I can't handle dealing with you right now. And Jane, well, she up and left. Destination unknown. After that, I couldn't make heads or tails of her bizarre behavior. It was a total curveball. Suspicion kicked in, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Linda had her fingers in this mess. So while Jane was off on her mysterious adventure, I played detective and did a bit of snooping around. It didn't take too long to figure out that Jane had been lying to me. I had access to her bank account because she had logged into it on my laptop and had saved the password. She had more than enough money in her account. In fact, when I went through her transactions, I saw that other than the usual amounts of money being debited, there was nothing else. I was very confused at that point. Why had she been withholding her money from me? Why had she been lying? I decided to go through her messages because nothing was making any sense to me. The first person I saw that she had texted was her mom. It was regarding the fight we had before she left. She told her mom that I had lashed out at her because she refused to give me any money. Linda told her, "I told you." I knew she was behind her change in behavior. She had always been out to get me, but I didn't think she realized just what kind of fire she was playing with. I scrolled through the rest of their chats and found out some things. The first was that Linda had been incessantly texting Jane about me. She had kept pointing out my negative traits, like me being money hungry and only staying with her for her money. That was hilarious, because I was the one who had been contributing the most to our household. The second was that she had been getting to Jane. Jane began to text about minor things I did that annoyed her. Linda only enabled and amplified her complaints. That explained why Jane was beginning to withdraw from me. To top it all off, they hatched a plan to pull the financial plug on me. Initially, Jane resisted the idea, but thanks to Linda constantly feeding her complaints, she eventually caved. The decision was made 2 months back. First, she fed Linda a story about me picking up extra hours, and the month he spun a tale of a colossal argument where I apparently unleashed some nasty words. It was like they were tag teaming to cut me off. That was only more fuel to the fire. I was obviously beyond hurt at what I had found out. I didn't know what to do about it, so I decided to go over to my best friend Mike's place. Mike has always been the first person I go to whenever I face any problem, regardless of what time it is. Since I showed up at his place at around 11:30 p.m., unannounced, that obviously raised some alarms for him. He let me in, got me settled in with a glass of wine, and asked me what happened. "So what's going on?" Mike asked. "I just found out some disturbing things, and I don't know what to do now." "All right, who is this about?" "Linda and Jane." "Oh, what did they do?" "So you know how Jane has been gambling away her money on some bogus investments for the last 2 months?" "Yeah, which was weird as hell. Did she do it again this month?" "Yeah, except not really." "Huh? What do you mean?" "Turns out she had her money all this time but has been refusing to give me any money." "Hold on, why? That seems so pointless. You've been running the bigger portions of the household expenses, right?" "Exactly. That's why what she's been doing has been so confusing." "Wait, is her mother involved in this?" "Of course she is. She's been texting Jane for a while about all my flaws and even managed to convince her to stop supporting me. And she's clueless about your earnings. Unbelievable. What about Jane? Isn't she sharp enough to see you've been a major financial player? Does she honestly believe your 9 to 5 is covering everything? Apparently, hired help knows how to handle this situation better. It's glaringly obvious, right? Pull the rug out from under her, leave her high and dry, and then drop the divorce bomb when she's at her most vulnerable. Isn't that a little cruel, Sandy? She didn't care about that. Why do you care? You know what? You're tired. Maybe you should sleep on it, and we can discuss things tomorrow. Mike was right. I was beyond exhausted. The emotions of the day drained me in every sense, and I wanted nothing more than to fall asleep. Thankfully, the next day was a weekend. Mike and I put on one of the many movies we had watched many times and fell asleep to it. The next morning, we decided to take a day off from all our troubles and just stayed in bed, watched a couple of movies and shows, cooked some great food, and spent a lot of time just enjoying each other's company. I won't lie, I had to fight with myself not to think about what had happened, but I knew that I needed to take time away if I wanted to deal with it properly. However, that night, I got a call from Linda. I didn't know if I wanted to pick it up, but when Mike looked over my shoulder and saw who was calling, he urged me to pick it up. With my heart pounding, I picked up the call. "Hello, Linda." "You scum. Wow, what did I do? You only want my daughter's money, don't you?" "Excuse me? That's why you've decided to cut off all her expenses, isn't it?" "No. She's been spending away all her money on her stupid investments. There's only so long that I can support her bad decisions, especially when they affect us." "Well, that was all a test." "A test? I was only trying to prove to Jane that you were only staying with her for her money, and look at you. You proved my point. Don't you think you overstepped a little too much into our relationship? Who are you to tell me what's right and wrong when you're a gold digger? All right, let's try to turn this ship around. You don't want your marriage to crumble, so here's the plan. A clean break, 50-50 on everything with Jane." "Seriously?" "Yep. Let's see how committed you both are to this. I'll whip up a contract for the both of you, and once those signatures are on paper, you better stick to the script." "It's a deal then." "Well, all right. If Jane agrees to it, we'll do it. I would also like a copy of that contract." "Of course. We'll see you on Tuesday." I couldn't believe that this was what my marriage had come to, but at the same time I was full of anger. How dare she call me a gold digger? And how dare Jane be okay with that? I had done nothing but support everything she did, even if it meant losses for us. Hell, even when she lied to me, I covered for us. When I told Mike about what had happened on the call, he began to smile. He helped me realize just how perfect what Linda had done was. If we split everything evenly, that would mean that our mortgage and other big expenses would have to be split. I knew for a fact that if Jane had to pay for her share of everything, she would have virtually nothing to fall back on. She didn't know about my side hustle because it had started off as a secret. I wanted it to get going properly before I told Jane about it. I also wanted to make enough money to buy Jane something expensive and then surprise her with my new source of income. In that moment, I couldn't be more relieved that I had a solid backup plan. Tuesday rolled around surprisingly fast, and Mike joined me after we wrapped up our workday, eager to witness the showdown. Back at home, we found Linda and Jane in the thick of things, Jane buried in her phone, while Linda, seated next to the lawyer, was scrutinizing his laptop, tossing demands around, presumably negotiating the terms of what I assumed was the contract. Linda looked at me with disinterest, while Jane looked anxious. When she saw me, she tried to communicate with me with her eyes to get us to go talk in the kitchen, but I ignored her. I walked over to Linda and asked to see the contract. The lawyer moved aside, and I got to see what was written. Like I had expected, everything was meant to be split evenly, along with the added rule of not helping the other if one of us was short on money. I agreed to it. We got the contract printed out, and I signed it. It didn't take long for Jane to start having problems. Initially, Jane and I didn't talk much to each other, because I didn't see why I needed to talk to someone who was so willing to see me suffer. But when you live with someone, talking becomes inevitable. Jane also really tried to get me to talk to her. I didn't really bother to answer her at first, but then I got tired of her constantly trying, so I engaged her in conversation. "Will you please just talk to me? We can't keep going this way," she pleaded. "What do you want me to say to you, Jane?" "I don't know, but I miss us." "Oh, really? Is that why you agreed to sign a contract fully separating our finances?" "Well, I just wanted to see if you were in it for the money." You know how many problems your mother has caused between us, and you still choose to believe her? Is this really the best solution for you? Hey, don't call my mother problematic. Also, what money do you have that I need so much? Look, I don't want you to lash out at me, okay? I'm trying to make amends here. There will be no amends until that contract is gone. It's only been 2 weeks since we signed it. I have seen no proof that you aren't here for the money. Well, aren't you a unique character? Listen, if you're facing financial hurdles, just give me a heads up. I'm willing to help. Wouldn't that go against your grand plan? Besides, I'd rather not end up breaching any contract obligations. Why the resistance? You're the one who complicated things. Can we please keep this civil? Sure thing. I could sense Jane grappling with the conflicting perspectives influenced by Linda and the ones she initially held. The Jane I had married would never have done something so drastic that had even the slightest bit of a chance to harm me. But here she was, obeying every word of her mother's, and she would live to regret it. That month, I had dutifully already paid off all our big loans, so when the next month rolled around, Jane was stuck. I had paid off my share of the loans and I was living well. Having to pay only half of it freed up my budget by a lot, and that meant that I was able to finally splurge on myself. Mike and I went out a lot. We went to all these fancy restaurants and drank fancy wines. We went to museums and quaint cafes. Obviously, all of this was getting posted on social media. I invited Jane to join on many occasions, but she always said she couldn't come along because, surprise, surprise, she had no money. To add to that, my graphic designing side gig was going so well that I had cut down the hours of my day job to focus more on that instead. I was even contemplating quitting it. Obviously, Jane was struggling a lot. I went as far as to divide even our groceries, so whenever I looked at her side of the pantry and fridge, it would almost always be almost empty. A part of me did feel bad for her, but I kept reminding myself that she had brought this on herself. Eventually, Linda came over to our place. I had been out with Mike, so I was pretty surprised to see her there. Oh, hey Linda, what brings you here? Don't you try and play innocent right now? Huh? I know what you've been doing, and I'm going to call the police on you. Excuse me, what are you talking about? You've been stealing from Jane. Huh? Why in the world would I pull a stunt like that? Oh, I know why. Because you're plotting revenge. You're fuming that she got you to sign that contract. Meanwhile, my poor daughter's been battling through a tough month while you're out there swiping her cash and living it up at those posh spots. Hold up. Your kid's got zero cash to swipe. Sure, I despise that contract, but let's not pretend you weren't the puppet master pulling the strings to get us to sign it in the first place. You forced this on us, and now your daughter is struggling. Liar. I'm calling the police right now. Go ahead. I haven't stolen a cent from your daughter. How do you have so much money then? Your job doesn't do that much more than hers, and from what she's told me, you've cut back more hours. I have another business on the side, a graphic designing one that I plan to surprise Jane with until you filled her head with garbage. You started your own business without telling me about it? I plan to buy you a car with the money I earned. How much do you make from it? Oh, a lot more than you think. You lied. I didn't do anything. I was trying to do a good thing and then you ruined it. Since you feel so strongly for your daughter, maybe you should be the one who supports her. And while we were at it, here I handed the divorce papers to Jane. I had filed for it right after we signed the contract and had been keeping it with me until the right moment presented itself. Jane stared at me with shock, but I couldn't care less. Linda would have normally been very happy to see those papers, considering that that had been what she was vying for all this time. But she looked mad instead, now that she knew what this was costing Jane. I told Jane that I would be moving out in 3 weeks, and that I would continue to split the remaining amount for the loans, and that was the end of it. Jane attempted to plead her case, but I made it clear that she brought it all upon herself. It's been a few months since the dust settled, and I'm ecstatic to report that I'm free from that toxic relationship. Linda didn't let Jane off the hook without a fight in the divorce proceedings. However, there was nothing for Jane to gain since we had signed a contract that explicitly divided all our assets. She only ended up losing more money since she couldn't keep up with all the mortgage expenses on the house. We sold it, and she moved back in with her mother. My life has only taken a positive turn. My business has been booming, and I've gotten to work with a lot of big brands. It has been a blissful and amazing time for me. I'm just thankful I had a safety net, or else I might have ended up in Jane's shoes. I hope she sees this as a lesson for the future, but then again, that's not my concern anymore.